Every mother knows the weight of sleepless nights, wondering if tomorrow will bring enough food, enough warmth, enough hope for their children. Some of us have been there counting pennies, praying for miracles, doing whatever it takes to keep our families together. Denise Washington was one of those mothers when she bought that broken-down cabin in rural Tennessee for $5. The place was falling apart, with holes in the roof and weeds growing through the floorboards. But it was shelter, and sometimes that's all we can ask for. What she found inside changed everything. A 13-year-old girl was living there, hiding in the shadows, surviving on her own. Most people would have panicked. Denise simply asked if she was hungry. That moment of kindness started something beautiful, but it also uncovered a secret that would shake them both. What was this girl running from that made an abandoned cabin feel safer than home? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Asterisk. The canvas duffel bag had seen better days, much like everything else in Denise Washington's life. Its faded navy surface bore the scars of countless moves, from Detroit apartment to Detroit apartment, each smaller and more desperate than the last. Now it sat on the passenger seat of her rusted Honda Civic, stuffed with everything 3 people owned in this world. A few changes of clothes, some worn children's books, a shoebox of important papers, and 17 cans of beans she'd bought on sale with her last $20 in the back seat. 8-year-old Trayvon pressed his face against the window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the Tennessee countryside roll by. Beside him, 5-year-old Kaisha clutched a one-eyed teddy bear named Mr. Buttons, humming a tune their grandmother used to sing before the cancer took her 2 years ago. Neither child had complained during the 12-hour drive south, though Denise caught Trayvon's worried glances in the rear-view mirror when he thought she wasn't looking. The GPS on her phone held together with electrical tape announced their destination in its mechanical voice. In 500 feet, turned right onto Hollow Creek Road. Denise slowed the Honda, squinting through the cracked windshield at the narrow dirt path that barely deserved to be called a road. Potholes deep enough to swallow a tire stretched ahead, flanked by towering oak trees whose branches formed a canopy so thick it turned midday into twilight. "Mama, are we really gonna live out here?" Trayvon's voice carried that careful tone children use when they're trying not to hurt their parents' feelings while expressing doubt. "For now, baby. Just for now." Denise kept her voice steady, though her knuckles whitened as she gripped the steering wheel. The Honda bounced and groaned over the rough terrain, its suspension protesting with every bump. She'd paid $450 for this car from a man behind a gas station in Detroit, knowing full well it might not survive the journey south. But it had, and that felt like a small miracle in a life that had been short on them lately. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a forgotten photograph. Denise's heart sank even as she forced a smile for the children. The listing in the newspaper had been honest. She realized. Fixer-upper cabin, 2BR, 1BA, $5,000 oboe. Owner motivated, but seeing it in person drove home just how desperate that owner must have been. The front porch sagged like a tired old man's shoulders, supported by posts that leaned at alarming angles. Shingles littered the ground around the structure, victims of countless storms and decades of neglect. What had once been white paint now hung in curled strips, revealing weathered gray wood underneath. But Denise had learned to see potential where others saw problems. The foundation looked solid, built from local fieldstone that would outlast them all. The roof, though patched with mismatched materials, still covered most of the structure. And the setting was something from a storybook. A creek bubbled somewhere nearby, its voice mixing with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a hawk. After the sirens and shouting of Detroit, the silence felt like a balm on her weary soul. "It's got character," she announced, cutting the engine. The Honda's death rattle filled the air for several seconds before blessed quiet returned. Kaisha climbed out first, Mr. Buttons tucked under one arm. "Mama, there's no other houses." "Where are the neighbors?" "Sometimes the best neighbors are the trees." "Baby girl." Denise retrieved the duffel bag and the shoebox of papers, including the handwritten deed she'd received after sending Harold Buckley her 5 crumpled bills and a money order for the rest. The old man had sounded surprised when she called, as if he'd forgotten he'd even listed the property. Trayvon emerged more cautiously, his eyes darting between the cabin and the dark spaces between the trees. At 8, he'd already developed the protective instincts of a child who'd seen his mother cry over bills, who'd helped carry boxes down 3 flights of stairs when they couldn't make rent, who understood that sometimes adults didn't have all the answers they pretended to have. The front door hung slightly ajar, its screen torn and flapping in the breeze. Denise approached it with a mixture of hope and trepidation that had become her default emotional state. The key Harold had mailed her turned easily in the lock, a small victory in a day that would surely hold challenges. Inside, the cabin revealed its secrets gradually as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. Dust motes danced in the rays that managed to penetrate the grimy windows. The main room combined living space and kitchen, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a small, ancient refrigerator humming in the corner. The wooden floors, though scarred and stained, were solid underfoot. 2 bedrooms branched off the main area, each barely large enough for a bed, and a bathroom that smelled of rust and old pipes completed the tour. "It's cozy," Denise said, her voice echoing in the empty space. She'd learned to find positive words for every situation, knowing that children absorbed their parents' attitudes like sponges. If she called it home, eventually it might feel like one. Trayvon explored with the methodical thoroughness of a child accustomed to new places. He tested light switches, some worked, others didn't, and peered into corners where spiders had built elaborate webs. Kaisha immediately claimed the smaller bedroom, spinning in circles with Mr. Buttons until she collapsed in giggles on the dusty floor. That first evening, they ate cold beans straight from the can while sitting on the front porch, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance among the trees. Denise had found an old broom and swept the main room, arranged their few belongings in the larger bedroom, and tested the water rusty at first, but it cleared after running for several minutes. The electricity worked sporadically, and the ancient refrigerator wheezed like an old dog, but they had shelter and running water and each other. "Mama, tell us the story again," Kaisha requested as darkness settled around them like a comfortable blanket. Denise pulled both children closer on the porch steps. "Once upon a time, there was a brave mama bear and her 2 cubs who traveled far from their old forest to find a new home. The journey was long and scary sometimes, but they had each other, and they had hope, and they knew that somewhere in the big wide world was a place where they could be happy and safe and together. And did they find it?" Trayvon asked, though he knew the story by heart. "They found something even better, baby. They found out that home isn't a place, it's the people you love. And as long as they stayed together, they could make any place feel like home, even an old cabin in the woods." As the children drifted off to sleep in the larger bedroom, Trayvon on the floor with pillows from the car, Kaisha on the bare mattress she'd discovered in the closet, Denise stood in the doorway watching them. The events that had brought them here felt like a lifetime ago. The layoff from the hospital where she'd worked as a nurse's aide for 6 years. The eviction notice that came 3 months later despite her best efforts to find new work. The nights spent in the Honda in Walmart parking lots while she searched. Online job boards at McDonald's free Wi-Fi. She'd found the cabin listing on a Facebook group for people seeking alternative housing. Harold Buckley had inherited the property from an aunt he'd barely known, and after 2 years of trying to sell it through real estate agents, he decided to practically give it away to someone who would actually live in it. When Denise called him from a gas station payphone in Nashville, explaining her situation with the careful dignity of a woman accustomed to asking for help. He'd agreed to hold it for her until she could scrape together the money. Now, standing in this dusty cabin surrounded by an ocean of trees, Denise felt something she hadn't experienced in months: the possibility of stability. It wasn't much: no neighbors for miles, uncertain electricity, and a dozen repair jobs that would take months to complete, even if she had the money. But it was theirs. She'd paid for it fair and square, and no landlord could come knocking with eviction papers. No neighbor could complain about the children's laughter. No housing inspector could condemn them for overcrowding. The night sounds of the Tennessee wilderness surrounded her as she finally made her own bed in the smaller room, a sleeping bag on the bare floor, with her jacket rolled up as a pillow. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called to its mate, and the creek sang its eternal song over stones worn smooth by centuries of water. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Denise Washington fell asleep without worrying about what tomorrow might take away from them. She didn't know that in the back room, behind a pile of old newspapers and beneath a tarp that blended with the shadows, someone else was learning to hope again too. The sun was barely peeking through the oak trees when Denise woke to the sound of Kaisha's giggling. She'd always been an early riser, but this felt different. The child was whispering to someone in that conspiratorial tone children use when they think adults aren't listening. "Kaisha, baby, who are you talking to?" Denise called softly, not wanting to wake Trayvon, who was still curled up on his makeshift bed of car seat cushions. The mouse. "Mama, she's hungry like we were yesterday." Denise smiled, pulling on her jeans and the University of Michigan sweatshirt that had seen her through nursing school years ago. Children and their imagination, though she hoped it actually was imagination and not evidence of an actual rodent problem. She padded barefoot to the main room, expecting to find her daughter playing with dust bunnies or talking to Shadow's dot instead. She found something that stopped her heart cold. A small plate sat on the floor near the back room, or one of the chipped ceramic dishes she discovered in the kitchen cabinet. It held crumbs that looked like they'd once been crackers, and beside it sat a mason jar with about an inch of water remaining. The setup was too deliberate, too purposeful to be Kaisha's imaginary game. "Kaisha, honey, did you put this plate here?" The 5-year-old shook her head, her dark eyes wide. "No, Mama. It was already there when I woke up." I think the mouse is shy. Denise's nursing training kicked in, the hypervigilance that came from years of working emergency shifts in Detroit. Someone had been in their cabin. Someone was possibly still here. Her mind raced through possibilities: a vagrant, a local who didn't appreciate strangers, someone who meant them harm. She needed to get the children out, get to the car, drive to the nearest town and call the police. But something held her back. The plate was clean, the crackers neatly arranged before being eaten. The water jar showed no signs of spillage or haste. This wasn't the work of someone malicious. It felt almost polite, like a house guest trying not to impose. "Trayvon, wake up, baby," she whispered, never taking her eyes off the back room door. "We're gonna play a game. We're gonna go sit in the car for a few minutes while Mama checks something." Her son woke instantly, already reading the tension in her voice. At 8, he'd learned to trust his mother's instincts without question. Within minutes, both children were safely in the Honda, doors locked, with instructions to honk the horn if they saw anything scary. Denise approached, the back room with her heart hammering against her ribs. The door creaked as she pushed it open slowly, her body positioned to run at the first sign of danger. The morning light filtered through a dirty window, revealing stacks of old newspapers, cardboard boxes, and what looked like remnants of the cabin's previous life: a broken rocking chair, moth-eaten curtains, the accumulated debris of decades. And there, in the far corner, behind a pile of yellowed magazines, she saw movement. "Please don't run." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, her voice gentle despite her fear. "I'm not going to hurt you." The movement stopped. Denise waited, barely breathing, until finally a face emerged from the shadows. A thin, pale face framed by dark hair that hadn't seen a proper washing in weeks. The girl couldn't have been more than 13 or 14, with hollow cheeks and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. They stared at each other across the dusty room, predator and prey trying to determine who was which. The girl's body was coiled like a spring, ready to bolt at the first threatening move. She wore clothes that might have once been pink but had faded to the color of old roses, and her feet were bare despite the cool morning air. "Are you hungry?" Denise asked, the same question she'd asked her own children countless times, the universal language of mothers everywhere. The girl's eyes darted to the empty plate, then back to Denise's face. She nodded once, barely perceptible. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was like rustling leaves, barely more than a whisper. "Luna. Luna. That's a beautiful name." Denise took a small step closer, the way she might approach a wounded animal. "I'm Denise. Those are my children outside in the car, Trayvon and Kaisha. We just moved here yesterday." Luna's gaze shifted toward the main room, toward the sound of muffled voices from the car outside. "They're scared," she said, her voice slightly stronger now. "A little bit, yes. We didn't expect to find anyone here." Denise sat down slowly on an overturned box, bringing herself closer to Luna's height. "How long have you been staying here?" The girl considered the question as if it required complex calculations. "Since the snow melted." "Maybe before. Months then?" This child had been living in an abandoned cabin for months, surviving on whatever she could find or catch or steal. The magnitude of it hit Denise like a physical blow. Where were her parents? Why wasn't anyone looking for her? "Luna, are you hurt? Are you sick?" The girl shook her head, but Denise's trained eye caught the tremor in her hands, the way she favored her left side slightly. Malnutrition at the very least, possibly exposure, certainly trauma of some kind. "Would you like some breakfast? I've got some canned peaches in the car, and I think I can get the stove working." Luna's eyes widened at the mention of peaches, and Denise realized she'd probably been living on whatever she could scavenge: berries, nuts, maybe fish from the creek. The offer of actual fruit was like promising gold. "Your children," Luna said carefully. "Will they be afraid of me?" The question revealed so much about this girl's experience with the world. How many doors had been slammed in her face? How many times had she been turned away or reported or treated like a threat instead of a child in need? "They might be curious," Denise admitted, "but not afraid. Not once they get to know you." She stood slowly, holding out her hand. Luna stared at it for a long moment before uncurling herself from her corner. She was taller than Denise had expected, probably 5.5 feet, but she moved like someone much smaller, trying to take up as little space as possible in the world. Together, they walked to the main room, where Trayvon and Kaisha were pressed against the car windows, their faces etched with worry. When they saw Denise emerge with the strange girl, Kaisha waved enthusiastically while Trayvon hung back, his protective instincts warring with his curiosity. "It's okay, babies. Come on out. I want you to meet Luna." The children approached cautiously. Kaisha, as always, led with her heart. "Are you the mouse?" she asked Luna seriously. Luna's lips curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Maybe," she whispered. "I knew it," Kaisha announced with satisfaction. "Mama, can the mouse have breakfast with us?" And so began the strangest morning meal of Denise Washington's life. She managed to coax the old stove into producing a flame, warmed the canned peaches in a dented saucepan she'd found in the cabinet, and served them in the few unbroken bowls while the four of them sat on the front porch in the warming morning sun. Luna ate slowly, carefully, as if she couldn't quite believe the food was real and permanent. Kaisha chattered about Mr. Buttons and their long drive from Detroit. while Trayvon watched Luna with the careful assessment of a child who'd learned to judge adults by their actions rather than their words. "Where do you come from?" Trayvon finally asked, the question all of them had been thinking. Luna's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. For a moment, Denise thought she might retreat back into silence. But then she spoke, her voice carrying a weight that no child should ever have to bear. "Nowhere good," she said simply. And in those two words, Denise understood that this girl hadn't just been living in their cabin. She'd been hiding in it. From someone, from something, from a life that had hurt her so badly that a collapsing building in the middle of nowhere felt safer than home. As Luna helped Kaisha chase fireflies among the wildflowers that afternoon, as she showed Trayvon how to identify edible berries and the best places to find creek stones, Denise made a decision that would change all their lives. She wasn't going to ask Luna to leave. She wasn't going to call the authorities. Not yet, anyway. Sometimes the most broken people found each other for a reason. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, they learned how to heal together. 3 days later, Denise stood in the hallway of Hollow Creek Elementary School, clutching enrollment forms that felt heavier than they should. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, was a kind woman with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent 30 years working with children from all walks of life. "So you're the family that bought the old Buckley place," Mrs. Henderson said, reviewing the paperwork. "Haven't seen anyone out there in ages. How are you finding it?" "It's perfect for us," Denise replied, which was becoming less of a lie each day. The cabin was slowly revealing its secrets: a hand-pumped well that produced sweet water, fruit trees gone wild behind the structure, and a root cellar that stayed cool even in the summer heat. More importantly, it was theirs. "And you have 2 children to enroll?" Denise's pen hesitated over the form. "Yes, Trayvon for 3rd grade and Kaisha for kindergarten." She didn't mention Luna, though the girl had been on her mind constantly since yesterday evening. Luna had vanished into the woods after dinner, returning only after the children were asleep with a handful of wild berries and a small fish she'd somehow caught with her bare hands. She'd left both offerings on the kitchen counter like a grateful house spirit, then disappeared back to her corner in the storage room. "Excellent. We'll get them placed in classes," and Mrs. Henderson paused, studying Denise's address. "Hollow Creek Road doesn't get mail delivery. How should we contact you for school matters?" This was the question Denise had been dreading. No phone service reached the cabin, no internet, no connection to the outside world, except for the 40-minute drive to town. In Detroit, she'd been constantly reachable by employers, by schools, by the endless stream of people who needed something from her. Here, the silence was both liberating and terrifying. "I'll check in regularly," she promised. "And I'll give you the number for the general store in town." Jerry said he'd take messages if needed. Mrs. Henderson made a note on the file. "Rural living takes some adjustment, but these children have some of the strongest community support you'll find anywhere. Teachers here don't just educate, they practically help raise them." On the drive home, Trayvon peppered her with questions about his new school while Kaisha dozed in her car seat, exhausted from exploring the playground. The road to their cabin felt more familiar each time they traveled it, the Honda learning the rhythm of the potholes and curves. "Mama," Trayvon said as they turned onto their dirt drive, "is Luna going to school too?" The question Denise had been avoiding. "I don't know, baby. That's complicated. Because she doesn't have parents?" Her 8-year-old's directness sometimes took her breath away. Something like that. That evening, as Luna emerged from the woods with her usual quiet grace, Denise decided to address the situation directly. The girl had been with them for nearly a week, sharing meals and helping with small tasks around the cabin, but they'd never discussed her status or future plans. "Luna, can we talk for a few minutes?" The girl tensed immediately, her body language screaming flight response. but she nodded and sat on the porch steps beside Denise while the children played with sticks and imagination in the yard. I need to ask you some questions, and I want you to know that whatever you tell me, you're safe here. Do you understand? Luna nodded again, her dark eyes fixed on her hands. Do you have family somewhere? People who are looking for you? The silence stretched long enough that Denise wondered if Luna would answer at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Maybe. I don't know if they're looking. What happened, sweetheart? What made you leave? Luna's hands began to shake, and Denise immediately regretted pushing. But the girl seemed determined to answer, as if she'd been carrying the words alone for too long. There was a foster home. The dad, She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. I couldn't stay. I had to run. The pieces began falling into place in Denise's mind. A runaway from the foster system, probably reported missing, possibly with her description circulated to law enforcement. Harboring her could be considered a crime, even with the best intentions. But looking at this fragile girl who'd somehow survived months in the wilderness rather than return to whatever hell she'd fled, Denise knew she couldn't turn her over to a system that had already failed her once. How old are you, Luna? 13, I think. My birthday was last month, but I might have lost track. 13. The same age Denise had been when her own mother died, leaving her to navigate the world with only her grandmother's fierce love as protection. She understood the weight of being too young to take care of yourself, but too old to trust that anyone else would do it properly. What would happen if we got you enrolled in school? If we made this official? Luna's eyes went wide with panic. They'd find me. They'd send me back. Not necessarily. There are legal ways to... No. Luna stood abruptly, backing toward the tree line. I can't. I won't go back. Okay. Denise held up her hands in surrender. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But Luna, you can't live in the woods forever. Winter will come, and I survived last winter. The quiet pride in her voice broke Denise's heart. This child had endured a Tennessee winter in an abandoned cabin with no heat, no adequate food, no medical care if she'd gotten sick or hurt. The fact that she'd survived was testament to a strength that no 13-year-old should have to develop. You don't have to survive anymore, Denise said gently. You can live. That night, Luna didn't disappear into her storage room hideaway. Instead, she helped Denise give the children baths in the old clawfoot tub, using rainwater they'd collected in buckets because the hot water heater was beyond repair. She braided Kaisha's hair with gentle fingers and listened to Trayvon read from one of his picture books, offering quiet encouragement when he stumbled over difficult words. When it came time for bed, Luna lingered in the doorway of the main room, clearly wanting something but afraid to ask. What is it, sweetheart? She swallowed hard. Could I maybe sleep in the house tonight? Just tonight? Denise's throat tightened. Of course. Always. This is your home too, for as long as you want it to be. She set up a sleeping bag in the corner of the main room, near the fireplace they hadn't yet had occasion to use. Luna curled into it like a cat finding warmth. And for the first time since Denise had discovered her, the girl's face looked truly peaceful in sleep. But in the morning, Denise woke to find a photograph on the kitchen counter, a faded family photo that showed a much younger Luna standing between two adults whose faces had been carefully torn away. On the back, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "Before everything got broken." Luna was nowhere to be found, and the sleeping bag lay empty by the cold fireplace. She'd left the photo like a gift, or maybe like a confession, then vanished back into the woods that had become her refuge from a world that hadn't learned how to keep her safe. Asterisk. The wooden spoon was a marvel of patience and necessity. Denise discovered it on the kitchen counter 2 weeks later, beside a handful of late summer blackberries still warm from the sun. The utensil had been carved from what looked like oak, sanded smooth with creek stones until it felt like silk under her fingers. Every curve was intentional, every edge carefully considered, the work of someone who'd had nothing but time and desperate need. Luna made this, Trayvon announced when he found his mother examining the spoon. He'd been tracking the girl's movements with the focused attention of a naturalist, learning her patterns and habits the way other children studied video games. How do you know? I watched her yesterday. She had a knife, a real small one, and she was sitting by the creek, working on it. Took her hours. He picked up one of the blackberries and popped it in his mouth. She said she got tired of eating with her fingers. The simplicity of it broke Denise's heart. While her own children complained about having to use mismatched utensils from the cabin's sparse collection, Luna had solved her problem by making what she needed from scratch. How many other needs had she met this way? How many small acts of survival had she performed alone in the darkness? That afternoon, Luna emerged from the woods earlier than usual, drawn by the sound of Kaisha's delighted squealing. Denise looked up from the laundry she was hanging on a makeshift line to see her 5-year-old, chasing something through the tall grass, while Luna followed at a safe distance. "What are you hunting, baby girl?" Denise called. "A frog." Luna says she can show me how to catch it without hurting it. And indeed, within minutes, Luna had coached Kaisha through the delicate process of cupping her small hands around a green tree frog no bigger than her thumb. The child's face glowed with accomplishment as the frog sat calmly in her palms, its throat pulsing with tiny breaths. "How did you learn to do that?" Trayvon asked, his initial wariness of Luna gradually giving way to admiration. "You have to move like water," Luna replied, her voice still soft but gaining confidence around the children. "Fast things get scared of fast movements, but they trust slow ones." She taught them other things too over the following days. How to identify which mushrooms were safe and which would make you sick. Where to dig for earthworms when the soil was just the right moisture. How to read the sky for weather changes and which trees provided the best shelter from sudden storms. She's like a nature book that talks. Kaisha observed one evening as they sat on the porch sharing a dinner of fish Luna had caught and vegetables from the abandoned garden they'd discovered behind the cabin. Denise had found work 3 days a week at a medical clinic in town, filing insurance forms and managing patient schedules for barely above minimum wage. It wasn't nursing, but it paid enough to keep them in groceries and fuel for the Honda. More importantly, it was a start, a foothold in their new community. The job meant leaving the children alone for hours at a time, a situation that would have terrified her in Detroit, but felt safer here in their isolated valley. Trayvon was responsible beyond his years, and Kaisha was content to play in the yard with her dolls and imagination. But increasingly, Denise realized it was Luna who kept them truly safe, appearing like a guardian spirit whenever they ventured too far from the cabin, teaching them which plants not to touch and how to recognize the warning signs of the black bears that occasionally wandered through their property. I found her camp, Trayvon told her one evening after she'd returned from work. "The place where she really lives." "Show me," Denise said, the part of her worried about violating Luna's privacy. He led her deep into the woods, following what looked like deer paths until they reached a natural depression in the land where several fallen trees created a hidden alcove. There, tucked between moss-covered logs and camouflaged with carefully arranged branches, was Luna's true home. It was like stepping into the dwelling of a forest sprite. The shelter was no more than 4 feet high and perhaps 6 feet long, but every inch had been designed for maximum efficiency. The floor was lined with layers of pine needles and dried grass, covered by a tarp that looked like it had been salvaged from a construction site. Containers made from large leaves held fresh water, nuts, and berries. A ring of stones marked where she built small, smokeless fires for warmth, but it was the care that took Denise's breath away. Luna had woven strips of bark into a kind of mat, arranged smooth river stones as a border around her sleeping area, and hung braided grass from the overhead branches like primitive wind chimes. This wasn't just survival. This was someone trying to create beauty and comfort in the midst of abandonment. "She's been living like this all winter," Traven said quietly. "Mama, what if she gets sick? What if something happens to her out here and we don't know?" The question haunted Denise as they walked back to the cabin. Luna was tough, resourceful, clearly gifted with outdoor skills that would put most adults to shame. But she was also 13 years old, alone, and carrying trauma that showed in the careful way she moved through the world, always ready to run, always prepared to disappear. That night, she found Luna sitting by the creek in the moonlight, her bare feet dangling in the cold water. The girl tensed when she heard Denise approach, but didn't flee. "Trayvon showed me your shelter," Denise said, settling beside her on the rocky bank. "I know. I saw you both." Luna's voice held no accusation, just acknowledgement. "It's beautiful. You've built something remarkable out there. It keeps me alive. Is that enough, though? Just staying alive?" Luna was quiet for so long that Denise began to think she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely louder than the water flowing over the stones. "I used to want more. When I was little, I thought about having a real family again, with a house and a yard and maybe a dog. But wanting things just makes it hurt worse when they get taken away. What if they didn't get taken away this time? They always do." Luna pulled her feet from the water and hugged her knees to her chest. "People are nice at first. Then they change their minds, or something better comes along, or they decide you're too much trouble. It's easier not to hope." Denise recognized the defensive wisdom of someone who'd been disappointed too many times. She'd felt it herself after her grandmother died, when potential families had looked at her like damaged goods, too old and too sad to be easily placed. The difference was that she'd eventually found her way to adulthood, to independence, to the ability to build her own life. Luna was still trapped in childhood's powerlessness, brilliant and capable, but legally invisible. "I'm not going anywhere," Denise said firmly. "Neither are Trayvon and Kaisha. We're not going to change our minds about you. You don't know that. I know that you carved a spoon because you were tired of eating with your fingers, instead of giving up and going hungry. I know that you've kept my children safe every day while I'm at work, even though nobody asked you to. I know that you built something beautiful in the woods because you refused to let the world make you stop caring about beauty. Those aren't the actions of someone who's given up. They're the actions of someone who's still fighting to live, not just survive." Luna's shoulders shook, and Denise realized the girl was crying silent tears that she tried to hide by, pressing her face against her knees. "I'm scared," Luna whispered. "I'm scared that if I let myself want this, really want it, something bad will happen and I'll have to run again. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to start over somewhere else." "Then don't run," Denise said simply. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together. That's what families do. They stick together through the hard parts. Even if people come looking for me, even then, we'll find a way to keep you safe and legal. I promise." It was a promise that felt both too large and absolutely necessary. Denise had no idea how she'd keep it, but looking at this fierce, broken, beautiful girl who'd somehow survived the unthinkable, she knew she'd move heaven and earth to try. The next morning, Luna's sleeping bag appeared in the corner of the main room again, and this time it stayed there. The missing person flyer was tucked between advertisements for lawn mowers and church bake sales on the community bulletin board at Harper's General Store. Denise almost walked past it, her mind focused on whether they could afford both milk and bread this week, when something made her stop and look closer. The black and white photograph showed a younger Luna, maybe 11 or 12, with shorter hair and a smile that looked forced even in the grainy reproduction. "Missing child," the header read in bold letters. "Luna Chambers, age 13, last seen June 15th. If you have any information, please contact ... Denise's hands trembled as she tore the flyer from the board, crumpling it slightly in her urgency to hide it from view. The date was from over a year ago. Luna had been missing, officially missing, for more than 15 months, and she'd spent at least half that time living in their abandoned cabin. Find something interesting? Jerry Harper's voice made her jump. The store owner was a kind man in his 60s who'd been treating her family like old friends since their first visit to town. Just looking at local events, she managed, stuffing the flyer into her purse. You know how it is with kids always looking for activities. Speaking of which, how are those children of yours settling in? And that girl who's been helping around your place? Denise's blood went cold. Girl? Tall, skinny thing with dark hair? Been seen with your kids a few times when you drive through town. Folks are curious, is all. Don't get many new faces around here, especially not ones who keep to the shadows like she does. Of course, people had noticed Luna, in a community small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. A mysterious teenager would be impossible to hide indefinitely. Denise had been naive to think they could keep Luna's presence secret forever. She's been staying with us temporarily, Denise said carefully. A family situation. Jerry nodded, but his eyes held questions he was too polite to ask directly. Well, if she needs anything, school enrollment, medical care, that sort of thing, Doc Morrison and Principal Henderson are good people to talk to. They've helped plenty of families work through complicated situations. The drive home felt longer than usual, the crumpled flyer seeming to burn through her purse like evidence of some terrible crime. When she reached the cabin, she found Luna teaching Kaisha how to braid wildflowers into chains while Trayvon practiced knots with a piece of rope she'd apparently produced from her vast store of survival knowledge. Mama, Kaisha ran to show off her flower crown. Luna says if we dry these, they'll keep their colors all winter. That's beautiful, baby girl. Denise tried to keep her voice normal, but Luna looked up sharply, her predator's instincts picking up on the change in atmosphere. That evening, after the children were asleep, Denise showed Luna the flyer. The girl's face went white as she stared at her younger self, at the description of her clothing and distinguishing marks, at the phone number that represented everything she'd been running from. They're still looking, Luna whispered. The flyer is old over a year. Maybe they've given up by now. They don't give up. Luna's voice held a certainty born of experience. I can't afford to let me stay missing. What do you mean? Luna was quiet for so long that Denise thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back too long. The Foster family, the Hendersons, they weren't just mean. They were getting money for keeping me, and there were other kids too. When I tried to tell the social worker what was happening, Mrs. Henderson said I was making it up because I was angry about being moved so much. She said if I kept lying, they'd send me somewhere much worse. The pieces began clicking into place in Denise's mind. What made you run? Mr. Henderson started coming into my room at night. When I tried to lock the door, he took the lock away. When I tried to tell Mrs. Henderson, she said I was being dramatic. Luna's hands were shaking now. So I left. I took some food and clothes and I just left. Oh, sweetheart. Denise wanted to pull the girl into her arms, but Luna had wrapped herself in invisible armor, untouchable in her pain. If they find me, they'll send me back, or somewhere just like it. They'll say I'm a troublemaker, that I run away from good families. And maybe this time they'll put me somewhere I can't escape from. The weight of responsibility settled on Denise's shoulders like a lead blanket. This wasn't just about harboring a runaway anymore. This was about protecting a child from a system that had failed her catastrophically. But she was one woman with no legal standing, no resources, no powerful connections to help her fight the machinery of child welfare. We'll figure something out, she promised, though she had no idea how. Will you? Luna's voice held a desperate hope that cut Denise to the bone. because I can't go back. I won't. I'd rather disappear into the woods forever than let them put me back in a place like that. The next few days passed in a haze of normalcy that felt increasingly fragile. Luna helped with household tasks, taught the children more wilderness skills, and gradually began staying indoors more often, as if sensing that her freedom to move openly was coming to an end. Denise researched legal options during her lunch breaks at the clinic, reading about emancipation procedures and guardian ad litem programs and foster parent licensing requirements until her head spun with bureaucratic IMPOSSIBILITI. Every phone call made her jump. Every knock at the door, not that they got many, sent Luna racing for her emergency kit and the back door. The girl had always been prepared to run, but now she was coiled like a spring under constant tension, ready to bolt at the first sign of official interest. It was Trayvon who noticed the car first. "Mama," he said quietly, appearing at her elbow as she sorted through mail at the kitchen table. "There's a white car at the end of our driveway. It's been sitting there for a while." Denise's heart hammered as she went to the window. Sure enough, a white sedan was parked where their dirt road met the county route, close enough to watch the cabin, but far enough away to avoid immediate notice. She couldn't see the occupants clearly, but the vehicle had the anonymous, official look of government transportation. "Luna," she called softly. But Luna was already gone, vanished like smoke through the back door with her emergency kit slung over her shoulder. Through the kitchen window, Denise caught a glimpse of her disappearing into the tree line, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd practiced this escape too many times. The white car sat there for 2 hours before finally driving away. But Denise knew it would be back, and next time, they might not announce their presence so obviously. The bureaucracy had found them, and like Luna had warned, they weren't the type to give up easily. That night, Luna didn't return to the cabin. Her sleeping bag lay empty by the fireplace, and somewhere in the darkness of the Tennessee mountains, a 13-year-old girl was once again, alone with nothing but her survival skills in her. Determination never to be caged again. Denise found Luna's emergency kit 3 days later while searching for her in increasingly desperate circles around their property. It was buried beneath a pile of leaves near the old oak tree where Luna liked to sit and watch the cabin, wrapped in a plastic garbage bag and cached like treasure against some future catastrophe. Inside, the makeshift waterproof container was a revelation of survival planning that broke Denise's heart. $17 in crumpled bills, a pocket knife with a blade worn thin from use, matches wrapped in wax paper, 3 cans of beans with pull-top lids, a change of clothes rolled tight as a sleeping bag, water purification tablets, a hand-drawn map showing 3 different escape routes from their valley, each marked with potential shelter locations and water sources. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a torn piece of flannel, was a composition notebook filled with Luna's careful handwriting. Denise hesitated before opening it, knowing she was violating the girl's privacy. But her worry overrode her scruples. The first entries were dated from early spring, when Luna was still living alone in the cabin. They read like a survivalist's log: weather observations, locations of edible plants, notes about the habits of local wildlife. But as the pages progressed, they became something more personal. Found a family of raccoons living in the big oak. The mother has 3 babies. She's teaching them how to wash their food in the creek. Wish someone had taught me things like that when I was little. The people who bought this place seem nice. The mother has kind eyes, like Mrs. Rodriguez did before they moved me. The little girl laughs all the time. I forgot how much I missed hearing children laugh. I think the mother knows I'm here, but she hasn't called anyone yet. Maybe she won't. Maybe she's different. The final entry was dated 5 days ago, the night before the white car appeared. Denise promised they wouldn't send me back. I want to believe her, but promises get broken. People mean well, but then reality gets in the way and suddenly you're in the back of a car going somewhere you don't want to go. If I have to run again, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm so tired of being afraid. Denise clutched the notebook to her chest, tears streaming down her face. This child had prepared for abandonment, even while desperately hoping to be allowed to stay. She documented her growing attachment to their family while simultaneously planning her escape from it. "Where is she, Mama?" Kaisha asked for the 100th time. The 5-year-old had been inconsolable since Luna disappeared, refusing to eat and asking constantly when her big sister would come home. "I don't know, baby, but I'm going to find her." Trayvon, wise beyond his years, looked up from the book he'd been pretending to read. "The white car scared her off, didn't it?" "Yes. Are they coming back?" Denise wanted to lie, to protect her children from the adult complexities that were threatening to tear their makeshift family apart. But they deserved honesty, probably. "Then we have to find Luna before they do," Trayvon announced with the simple logic of childhood. "We have to bring her home and figure out how to keep her safe. Home." Her 8-year-old had called this place home, and included Luna in that definition without question or hesitation. When had children become wiser than adults about the true meaning of family? That evening, Denise made a decision that terrified and liberated her in equal measure. She called in sick to work, loaded her children into the Honda, and began a systematic search of every hiding place Luna had ever mentioned, every shelter she might seek in her desperate flight from the authorities. They found her on the second day, huddled in a limestone cave about 5 miles from the cabin. She was soaked from the rain that had been falling steadily since morning, shivering despite the jacket she'd wrapped around her thin frame. When she saw them approaching, her first instinct was to run deeper into the cave, but Keisha's voice stopped her. "Luna, we brought you soup." The girl emerged slowly, warily, like a wild animal approaching a trap. Her lips were blue with cold, and Denise could see the fever bright in her eyes. Living rough in the Tennessee mountains during autumn was taking its toll on even Luna's remarkable constitution. "You came looking for me," Luna said, her voice thick with disbelief. "Of course we did," Trayvon replied matter-of-factly. "You're family. Family doesn't give up on family." They drove back to the cabin in relative silence, Luna wrapped in every blanket they could find while the heater ran full blast. Once inside, Denise ran a hot bath and made tea with honey while the children clustered around Luna like protective satellites. "I saw them again," Luna said quietly as she sipped the tea. "The white car. They had binoculars, and they were taking pictures of the cabin. They know I'm here, or at least they know I was." "Good," Denise said, surprising everyone including herself. "Good. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of you living in fear. I'm tired of pretending that love and determination aren't enough to fight for what's right." She sat down across from Luna, reaching for the girl's cold hands. "I want to adopt you, legally. I want you to be my daughter, not just in our hearts, but on paper, where no one can take you away from us." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "They won't let you. They'll say I'm too damaged, too much trouble. They'll say you can't afford 3 kids on what you make at the clinic. Maybe, but I'm going to try anyway. And if they say no, we'll find another way. We'll get a lawyer, we'll fight it in court. We'll make so much noise that someone finally pays attention to what you've been through and what you need now. What if they take me away while we're waiting? What if they put me back with the Hendersons or somewhere worse? Then we'll deal with that too. But Luna, listen to me, running away isn't protecting you anymore. It's just postponing the inevitable. They know where you are, and they're not going to stop looking. The only way to truly be safe is to make this legal, to make me your real mother in the eyes of the law." Luna was quiet for a long time, staring into her tea as if it might hold answers to impossible questions. When she looked up, her expression held a fragile hope that nearly broke Denise's heart. "Do you really want me? Not just because you feel sorry for me, but really want me?" "Oh, sweetheart." Denise pulled the girl into her arms, feeling how small she was beneath all that fierce independence. "I've wanted you since the moment I found you in that back room. I've wanted you every time you made my children laugh. Every time you brought us berries from the woods. Every time you carved something beautiful, just because you refused to let the world make you stop caring about beauty. I want you exactly as you are, forever. Even if I'm broken? Especially then. We're all a little broken, Luna. But broken things can be mended. And sometimes they're stronger in the places where they heal." That night, for the first time since the white car had appeared, Luna slept in her corner by the fireplace instead of in her emergency shelter in the woods. And when morning came, she helped Denise make phone calls to lawyers and social workers and anyone else who might help them navigate the Byzantine world of family court. It was time to stop running and start fighting for the right to stay home. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed it to Denise at her front door. Inside were legal documents that made her hand shake as she read them. A petition for the immediate return of one Luna Elizabeth Chambers to the custody of her biological father, Richard Chambers, and his wife, Margaret. "Luna." Denise called, her voice tight with panic. "Luna, I need you to come here right now." The girl appeared from the kitchen where she'd been helping Kaisha make breakfast, took one look at Denise's face, and went pale. "They found me." "Yes. But Luna, this says..." Denise looked at the documents again, certain she'd misread them. "This says your biological parents are looking for you. Not the foster family. Not the state. Your actual parents." Luna's reaction was not what Denise expected. Instead of relief or confusion, the girl's face crumpled with something that looked like terror. "No," she whispered. No. They can't have found me. I was so careful. Sweetheart, I don't understand. These are your parents. Your real parents. Isn't that they're not my parents?" Luna's voice cracked like a whip across the quiet morning. "They gave up that right a long time ago." She snatched the papers from Denise's hands, scanning them with the frantic intensity of someone looking for escape routes in a burning building. When she found what she was looking for, her knees buckled and she sank to the floor. "They're claiming I was kidnapped. They're saying the foster family was supposed to return me to them after 6 months. But I ran away before they could complete the reunification process." Luna laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor. "Reunification. Like we were ever a family to begin with. Luna, what really happened? I need to know the truth, all of it." The girl looked at Trayvon and Kaisha, who were watching from the kitchen doorway with wide, frightened eyes. "Can you take them outside, please? They shouldn't hear this." Denise settled the children on the porch with coloring, books, and strict instructions not to wander off, then returned to find Luna sitting on the floor, still clutching the legal papers. "My father is Richard Chambers. He owns 3 car dealerships in Nashville and donates money to politicians and sits on the board of his church." Luna's voice was flat, emotionless. "He's also a monster." She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. "He started hitting me when I was maybe 5. Not where anyone could see. Never where anyone could see. My mother would clean up the blood and make excuses about why I was hurt, why I was afraid, why I didn't want to go home after school." Denise felt sick. "Luna, it got worse when I got older. The hitting turned into other things. And when I finally got brave enough to tell a teacher, she called Child Protective Services." Luna's laugh was bitter. "Do you know what happens when you accuse a respected businessman of abuse? When it's your word against someone who donates to the Police Benevolent Fund? They didn't believe you. Oh, they investigated. Very thoroughly. My father was charm itself, showed them my room, talked about his concern for my mental health, produced records from a therapist who said I had problems with fantasy and attention-seeking behavior. The social worker recommended family counseling. Denise's hands clenched into fists. She'd seen this pattern in the emergency room too many times. Children whose injuries were explained away by smooth talking. Parents whose cries for help were dismissed as behavioral problems. But something must have happened for you to end up in foster care. One night he went too far, put me in the hospital with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. Even he couldn't explain that away. Luna's voice grew smaller, but his lawyer was very good. He convinced everyone that my father had anger management issues brought on by work stress and his concern for my well-being. The court agreed to let me go into temporary foster care while he got counseling, with the understanding that I'd be returned to him once he completed the program. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture more horrifying than anything Denise had imagined. So the foster family was supposed to be temporary, 6 months. Just long enough for him to go to some anger management classes and convince a judge that he was reformed. But the Hendersons were worse than home in different ways. And I realized that if I went back to my father after what I'd put him through, the embarrassment, the legal fees, the damage to his reputation, he might actually kill me next time. So you ran. 3 weeks before I was supposed to go back. I'd been planning it for months, saving food, learning about the wilderness. I knew if I could stay hidden long enough, maybe they'd give up looking. Maybe they'd decide I wasn't worth the trouble. Luna stood up slowly, walking to the window where she could see Trayvon and Kaisha playing in the yard. But I was wrong. He can't let me stay missing because then people might wonder why he's not doing more to find his beloved daughter. And he certainly can't let me stay free to tell people the truth about what he did. Denise felt the world spinning around her. Everything she'd thought she understood about Luna's situation was wrong. This wasn't about a troubled runaway from the foster system. This was about a powerful man trying to reclaim a child he'd already traumatized once, possibly to silence her permanently. The missing person flyers? The official search was all theater, of course. He's the grieving father whose troubled daughter disappeared from a nice foster family. He's done everything possible to find me, spent thousands on private investigators, never given up hope. Luna's voice dripped with sarcasm. And when they bring me back, if I have any more accidents or develop any more behavioral problems, well, everyone will understand. I'm clearly a deeply disturbed child. We won't let them take you. The words came out of Denise's mouth before she'd consciously formed them, but she meant them with every fiber of her being. How can you stop them? Look at those papers. He has the best lawyers money can buy. I'm legally his daughter, and according to the court records, he's completed his anger management program and is ready to provide a loving home for his child. You're a single mother working part-time at a medical clinic. What judge is going to choose you over him? Luna was right, and they both knew it. Richard Chambers had money, connections, a carefully constructed public image. Denise had love and determination and a duffel bag full of second-hand clothes. In a legal battle, there would be no contest. Then we don't fight it legally, Denise said quietly. What do you mean? I mean we disappear. All of us. Tonight, before they can serve any more papers or get a court order. We pack up everything we can fit in the Honda and we drive somewhere they'll never think to look. Luna stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. You'd do that? You'd give up your job, your home, everything you've built here, just to keep me safe? This isn't a home without you in it. And jobs can be found anywhere. But Luna, Denise took the girl's hands in hers. If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be fugitives. We'll have to change our names, avoid anything official, live on the margins forever. Are you prepared for that? Are you? Luna's eyes searched Denise's face. Because I've been living on the margins my whole life. But you have other options. You could let them take me and build a normal life with Trayvon and Kaisha. You don't have to sacrifice everything for someone else's broken kid. You're not someone else's broken kid, Denise said fiercely. You're my daughter. And I would burn down the world before I'd let anyone hurt you again." Luna began to cry, then deep, silent sobs that shook her entire body. Denise pulled her close, feeling the weight of the decision settling around them like armor. They had perhaps 6 hours before the authorities would expect some kind of response to the legal papers. 6 hours to gather their most essential belongings, drain Denise's small savings account, and disappear into the vastness of America with nothing but love and desperation to guide them. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like the only choice that made sense. Asterisk. Denise's mother's wedding ring sat in the palm of her hand like a small circle of betrayal and necessity. The gold band was worn thin from 40 years of marriage, love, and hard work, first on her mother's finger, then passed down to Denise as something to remember her by. Now it represented their last hope for a legal defense against Richard Chambers and his army of lawyers. "Are you sure about this, ma'am?" The pawnshop owner, a gruff man named Eddie with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, examined the ring under his jeweler's loupe. "This has sentimental value written all over it. I'm sure." Denise's voice was steadier than her hands. "How much?" "I can give you 400. The gold's good quality, and there's some nice detail work on the band." $400. It wasn't much against the retainer fees that real lawyers charged, but it might buy them a consultation, maybe an hour of legal advice from someone who understood the system better than she did. "Mama, why are you selling Grandma's ring?" Trayvon asked quietly as they left the pawnshop. He'd been unusually silent during their drive into town, processing the events of the past 24 hours with the serious consideration of a child forced to grow up too fast, because sometimes we have to let go of things from the past to protect the people we love in the present, she replied, slipping the cash into her purse next to the business card. Eddie had given her a lawyer named James Mitchell, who specialized in family law and occasionally took cases pro bono. Luna had refused to come with them to town, too afraid of being spotted by the wrong people. She'd spent the morning teaching Kaisha how to identify different bird calls and helping pack what she called a go bag essential, supplies hidden in the woods in case they needed to run quickly. Even now, planning for a legal fight, Luna couldn't quite believe they wouldn't eventually need to disappear. The law office of James Mitchell occupied the second floor of a building that had seen better decades. The waiting room furniture was mismatched but clean, and the receptionist, a woman about Denise's age with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression, looked up from her computer with the weary patience of someone who'd heard every sob story in the book. "I need to see Mr. Mitchell about a custody case," Denise said. "It's urgent. They always are, honey." "What makes you special?" The blunt question caught Denise off guard, but something in the woman's eyes suggested genuine interest rather than dismissal. "A 13-year-old girl is about to be returned to her abusive father because he has money and lawyers, and I have a $400 pawn shop loan." The receptionist studied her for a long moment, then picked up her phone. "Jim, you need to see someone. Trust me on this one." James Mitchell was younger than Denise had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of rumpled appearance that suggested he cared more about justice than appearances. His office walls were covered with photos of children, certificates from legal aid organizations, and a framed quote that read, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." "Tell me everything," he said after introductions were made. "Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." Denise told him about finding Luna in the cabin, about the girls' gradual trust and integration into their family, about the missing person flyer and the revelation of her true background. Mitchell took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening with the focused attention of someone accustomed to untangling complicated family situations. "So she's been living with you for about 4 months, but you have no legal standing as her guardian." "That's right. And Richard Chambers is claiming parental rights." based on biological relationship, and court-ordered reunification that was interrupted by Luna's disappearance. Yes, but Mr. Mitchell, she ran away for a reason. She's terrified of going back to him. I believe you, but fear isn't legal evidence, and judges have to work within the system as it exists, not as we wish it were. He leaned back in his chair, studying his notes. The good news is that Luna's age works in our favor. At 13, most courts will at least listen to her preferences about placement. The bad news is that overturning biological parent rights requires clear and convincing evidence of abuse or neglect. She has scars, physical evidence of what he did to her. From when she was removed from his custody the first time, the court will argue that he's completed anger management and deserves a chance to prove he's changed. Mitchell's expression was sympathetic but realistic. Denise, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be an uphill battle against an opponent with significant advantages. What are our chances? If we can get Luna to testify of her experiences, if we can find evidence of ongoing threats or manipulation, if we can demonstrate that returning her to his custody would be harmful, maybe 20%. 20%. Denise felt the weight of those odds settling in her chest like a stone. And if we lose, Luna goes back to Richard Chambers, and you could potentially face charges for harboring a runaway and interfering with a court order. The office went quiet except for the tick of an old clock on the wall and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Denise thought about Luna's emergency kit buried in the woods, about the careful way she moved through the world, always ready to run, about the trust it had taken for her to finally sleep inside the cabin instead of in her shelter among the trees. What do we need to do to fight this? First, we file a motion requesting that Luna be appointed a guardian ad litem, someone to represent her interests, independently of both you and Chambers. Second, we request a psychological evaluation to assess the potential harm of returning her to his custody. Third, we prepare Luna to testify about her experiences, which won't be easy. She's been through enough. I don't want to put her through more trauma. I understand. But her voice might be the only thing that saves her. Judges need to hear directly from children about their experiences, especially in cases like this where the abuser has resources and respectability. Mitchell walked them through the paperwork, explained the timeline. They had perhaps 2 weeks before the initial hearing where Chambers would formally request Luna's return. 2 weeks to build a case, find evidence, and prepare a 13-year-old girl to face the man who terrorized her childhood in open court. As they left the lawyer's office, Trayvon took Denise's hand. Mama, are we going to win? I don't know, baby. But we're going to try our hardest. What if we don't win? What happens to Luna? Denise stopped walking, crouched down to meet her son's eyes. At 8 years old, he deserved honesty about what they were facing. Then we might have to make some very hard choices about what's right and what's legal. You mean like when you told me that sometimes rules are wrong and good people have to break them to do the right thing? Her son's moral clarity took her breath away. Something like that. That evening, they held a family meeting on the front porch while fireflies began their nightly dance in the tall grass. Luna listened silently as Denise explained what the lawyer had told them, what the legal battle would involve, what the odds were against them. So I'd have to testify, Luna said when Denise finished. In front of him, in front of everyone. Yes, but you wouldn't be alone. Mr. Mitchell would be there, and the judge would make sure you felt safe. Luna was quiet for a long time, watching Kaisha chase fireflies with the innocent joy of a child who still believed the world was fundamentally safe. What if I can't do it? What if I get up there and can't speak, or I say the wrong thing? Then we'll deal with that too. But Luna, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You survived things that would have broken most adults. If you can do that, you can do this. And if we lose? Denise had been dreading this question, but she knew Luna deserved the truth. If we lose through the legal system, then we explore other options. You mean running? I mean keeping you safe, whatever that takes. Luna nodded slowly, as if she'd expected this answer. Okay, I'll testify. But I need some time to practice, to figure out how to say things that don't make me sound crazy or vindictive. Over the next few days, their cabin became a kind of war room. Mitchell visited twice, bringing case files and legal precedents, helping Luna understand what kinds of questions she might face and how to answer them effectively. The girl approached the preparation with the same methodical determination she'd once applied to survival, taking notes and asking clarifying questions until she understood every aspect of the process. But the strain was showing. Luna's nightmares returned with a vengeance, and more than once Denise woke to find her standing by the windows, staring out into the darkness as if expecting to see her father's car coming up to drive. The girl's appetite disappeared, and she lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Maybe we should just go, Luna said one evening after a particularly brutal practice session with Mitchell. Pack up tonight and drive until we run out of road. I've put you all through enough. Running isn't protecting you anymore, Denise replied, using Luna's own words from weeks earlier. It's just postponing the inevitable. Your father has resources we can't match if we're fugitives. But here, with the law on our side, we have a chance. A 20% chance. Better than no chance at all. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Miss Patterson, the social worker who'd initially checked on their family, called Denise at the clinic 3 days before the hearing. I've been doing some research into the Chambers case, she said without preamble. There are some things you need to know. They met that evening at a diner halfway between the clinic and the cabin, Miss Patterson arriving with a manila folder that she handled like it contained explosives. I pulled the records from Luna's original removal, she began. The official reports, the hospital records, the statements from teachers and neighbors. What's interesting isn't what's in the file, it's what's missing. What do you mean? 3 different teachers filed reports about Luna's behavior and injuries over a 2-year period. Only one of those reports made it into the official file. 2 hospital visits for accidental injuries that were concerning enough for staff to call Child Protective Services, but only the final, most serious incident was documented in the case record. Denise felt her pulse quicken. Someone was burying evidence. It gets worse. I contacted the social worker who handled Luna's original case. She's retired now, living in Florida, and when I mentioned the Chambers case, she got very quiet. Then she said something interesting. I always wondered how that man's donations to the Children's Charity Fund affected our department's budget decisions. The implications hit Denise like a physical blow. He was buying silence. I can't prove it, but I can testify about what I've found, about the pattern of missing documentation and the suspicious gaps in the official record. It might not be enough to convict him, but it could be enough to prevent Luna's return until a more thorough investigation is completed. Miss Patterson slid the folder across the table. There's something else. The foster family Luna ran from the Hendersons. They've had their license revoked. 3 other children came forward with allegations similar to what Luna described. The state is conducting a criminal investigation. Does this help our case? It validates Luna's credibility. She wasn't a troubled child making up stories. She was a traumatized child accurately reporting abuse in multiple settings. That's a very different narrative. For the first time in weeks, Denise felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. 20% odds were starting to look better. The night before the hearing, Luna couldn't sleep. Denise found her sitting by the creek in the moonlight, fully dressed as if she expected to need to run any moment. Scared? Denise asked, settling beside her on the rocky bank. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But Luna, tomorrow isn't about him anymore. It's about you finally getting to tell your truth to someone with the power to protect you. What if they don't believe me? Then we'll figure out what comes next. But sweetheart, you're not that scared little girl hiding in a foster home anymore. You're strong and you're smart, and you have people who love you fighting alongside you. That changes everything." Luna leaned against Denise's shoulder, and for a moment, they both listened to the eternal song of water over stones. The same sound that had been Luna's lullaby during all those months. She'd survived alone in the wilderness. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Luna said quietly, "I want you to know that these months with you and the kids have been the best of my life. You gave me something I didn't think existed, a family that actually wanted me." "You gave us something too," Denise replied. "You showed us that families aren't just born, they're built, one act of kindness at a time. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and judges and a legal system that didn't always bend toward justice. But tonight, sitting by their creek under Tennessee stars, they were simply a mother and daughter preparing to fight for their right to stay together. The courthouse in Nashville looked like a monument to intimidation, all gray stone and soaring columns designed to make ordinary people feel small. Denise held Luna's hand as they climbed the steps, both of them dressed in their best clothes, which wasn't saying much. Luna wore a navy dress Denise had found at Goodwill, and Denise herself had borrowed a blazer from the clinic's office manager, trying to look like someone the legal system might take seriously. James Mitchell met them in the hallway outside the courtroom, his expression grave but determined. "Remember, Luna, just tell the truth. Answer the questions they ask. Don't volunteer extra information. And if you need a break at any time, just say so." Through the courtroom's glass doors, Denise caught her first glimpse of Richard Chambers. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 45, with silver-touched hair and the kind of expensive suit that whispered rather than shouted about wealth. He sat at a table surrounded by 3 lawyers, all of them radiating the confident calm of people accustomed to winning. "He looks so normal," Luna whispered, her voice tight with old fear. "Monsters often do," Mitchell replied quietly. "That's what makes them dangerous." Judge Patricia Hendricks, no relation to Luna's former foster family, was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd seen every variety of human failing. She called the court to order with a voice that brooked no nonsense. "This is a petition for the return of a minor child to parental custody," she announced. "Mr. Chambers, your attorney may proceed." Richard Chambers' lead attorney was a man named Harrison Blake, whose opening statement painted a picture of a devoted father whose troubled daughter had been manipulated into running away by well-meaning but misguided strangers. He spoke of parental rights, of court-ordered reunification plans, of the importance of keeping families together despite temporary difficulties. "My client has completed all court-mandated counseling," Blake continued, his voice smooth as silk. "He has rebuilt his life, his home, his emotional stability. He's ready to welcome his daughter back with love and patience for whatever healing she may need." When it was Mitchell's turn, he rose slowly, and Denise could feel the weight of their impossible odds in his measured movements. "Your Honor, this case is not about parental rights or family reunification. This is about a child's fundamental right to safety. Luna Chambers didn't run away from a loving home. She escaped from one that nearly killed her. And the evidence will show that returning her to that environment would constitute a grave threat to her physical and emotional well-being." The first witness was Dr. Elizabeth Morris, the emergency room physician who treated Luna's injuries 2 years earlier. She read from her medical notes with clinical precision: 3 broken ribs, concussion, extensive bruising consistent with repeated blunt force trauma. But when Blake cross-examined her, he focused on the time that had elapsed, on Richard Chambers' completion of anger management, on the possibility of change and redemption. Miss Patterson took the stand next, her testimony about missing documentation and suspicious gaps in the official record creating ripples of tension in the courtroom. But Blake dismissed her concerns as speculation, the overwrought theories of a social worker looking for conspiracy where none existed. Your Honor, Blake said smoothly. These allegations are not only unsubstantiated, they're irrelevant. Whatever mistakes may have been made in the past, my client has complied with every court order and demonstrated his commitment to being the father Luna needs. Then it was Luna's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her chin up and her shoulders squared. But Denise could see the tremor in her hands as she was sworn in. The court reporter prepared her machine. The bailiff checked that the recording equipment was functioning, and Judge Hendricks leaned forward slightly. Her attention focused entirely on the 13-year-old girl who held the power to determine her own fate. Luna, Mitchell began gently, can you tell the court how old you are and where you've been living for the past 4 months? I'm 30. I've been living with Denise Washington and her children in a cabin on Hollow Creek Road. Luna's voice was steady, stronger than Denise had dared hope. And before that, where were you living? In the woods. In an abandoned cabin and sometimes in shelters I built myself. For how long? About 8 months. Mitchell walked Luna through her story methodically, her father's abuse, the failed system that had returned her to danger, her desperate flight to the wilderness, her gradual trust in the Washington family. Luna answered each question with quiet dignity. Never melodramatic, never self-pitying, just stating facts with the weight of lived experience behind them. Luna, Mitchell said, approaching the most crucial question, are you afraid of your biological father? Yes. Can you tell the court why? Luna looked directly at Richard Chambers for the first time since entering the courtroom. He sat motionless, his face a mask of concerned paternal love. But something flickered in his eyes when their gazes met. Something Luna recognized and Mitchell caught. Because he told me that if I ever caused him trouble again, if I ever embarrassed him or cost him money or made people ask questions, he would make sure I never had the chance to do it twice. Her voice never wavered. And I believe him. Harrison Blake rose for his cross-examination like a predator sensing wounded prey. His strategy became immediately clear. Undermine Luna's credibility by portraying her as a troubled, manipulative child who'd been coached by adults with their own agenda. Luna, you've been living with Mrs. Washington for 4 months without any legal authorization. Is that correct? Yes. And during that time, she's told you that she wants to adopt you? Yes, but just yes or no, please. So you understand that if you return to your father's custody, Mrs. Washington's adoption plans would be impossible? Luna hesitated, seeing the trap but not knowing how to avoid it. Yes. And you've become quite attached to Mrs. Washington and her children, haven't you? Yes. So attached that you might say anything necessary to avoid being separated from them. Mitchell shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. Sustained. But Blake had planted the seed. He continued his assault with surgical precision, painting Luna's months of wilderness survival as an elaborate fantasy. Her accusations against her father as the delusions of a disturbed child who'd been manipulated by well-meaning but misguided strangers. Luna, isn't it true that you've told several different stories about why you left your foster placement? No, that's not. First you said it was because of abuse by Mr. Henderson. Then, you claimed it was because you were afraid of returning to your father. Which version is true? Both. Both things are true. So you admit your story has changed? Luna's composure began to crack. No, I didn't change anything. You're twisting. Your Honor, Blake interrupted smoothly. I think we can see the pattern here. This child has been coached to portray herself as a victim, when the reality is that she's a troubled teenager who's found people willing to enable her avoidance of parental authority. Luna looked across the courtroom at Denise, her eyes wide with panic. This was exactly what she'd feared, that somehow the system would make her the villain in her own story. But then Judge Hendricks intervened, her voice cutting through Blake's theatrics like a knife. Mr. Blake, I've been listening to testimony in family court for 23 years. I've heard every variety of manipulation, coaching, and legal gamesmanship you can imagine. But I've also learned to recognize truth when I hear it. She turned to Luna. Child, I want you to look directly at me and answer this question. If I already return to your father's custody, do you believe you will be safe? Luna met the judge's eyes without wavering. No, ma'am, I don't. And if I don't order your return, if I allow you to remain with Mrs. Washington while we conduct a more thorough investigation, would that be what you want? Yes, ma'am. More than anything. Judge Hendricks nodded slowly, then turned her attention to Richard Chambers. Mr. Chambers, would you please stand? Richard Chambers rose with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. Even now, facing the possibility of legal defeat, he radiated the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of getting his way. Sir, I've reviewed the records from your daughter's original removal. The medical evidence of abuse was substantial and uncontested. You completed court-ordered anger management, which the state accepted as sufficient for reunification. But I'm troubled by some gaps in the documentation that Miss Patterson brought to my attention. Blake started to object, but Judge Hendricks silenced him with a look. More concerning to me is your daughter's testimony. Not because it's coached or manipulative, it's neither, but because it demonstrates a level of trauma and fear that raises serious questions about your fitness as a parent. She paused, studying Chambers with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every kind of human evil dressed up in respectability. Mr. Chambers, your daughter spent 8 months surviving in the wilderness rather than risk returning to your care. She chose hunger, cold, isolation, and genuine physical danger over the possibility of living under your roof again. That tells me everything I need to know about the environment you created in your home. The courtroom was so quiet that Denise could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Furthermore, I find Mrs. Washington's actions providing shelter and protection to a child in desperate need to be not only legally defensible under emergency circumstances, but morally commendable. This court will not punish compassion. Judge Hendricks picked up her gavel, and in that moment, Denise felt the weight of their entire future balanced on the edge of judicial discretion. The petition for immediate return of the minor child, Luna Elizabeth Chambers, to parental custody is denied. Temporary custody is granted to Mrs. Denise Washington, pending completion of a comprehensive investigation into the allegations of abuse and the circumstances surrounding the child's original placement. Mr. Chambers, you will have supervised visitation rights if and when the child expresses willingness to see you. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Luna's legs gave out, and she collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief. Across the courtroom, Richard Chambers' mask finally slipped, revealing something cold and furious beneath the veneer of concerned fatherhood. But it didn't matter what he wanted anymore. For the first time in her life, Luna had been heard, believed, and protected by the very system that had failed her before. Justice, it turned out, was possible after all. 6 months after Judge Hendricks' gavel changed their lives forever. Denise stood in the backyard of their new house, a real house with insulation and reliable plumbing and enough bedrooms for everyone to have their own space. The cabin on Hollow Creek Road had been their sanctuary, but this place in town was their home. Luna was kneeling in the garden she'd insisted on planting, showing Keisha how to tell when tomatoes were ready for picking. At 14 now, she'd grown 3 inches and gained 15 pounds, her face finally filling out with the softness of a teenager who didn't have to worry about where her next meal was coming from. She still moved with the quiet grace of someone who'd learned to read the world around her, but the hypervigilance had faded, replaced by something that looked remarkably like peace. "Mama, look!" Keisha held up a tomato the size of her fist, its skin glowing red-orange in the afternoon sun. "Luna says we can make salsa." "She's right," Denise replied, settling into one of the porch chairs that had come with the house. The adoption paperwork was finalized now. Luna's name officially changed to Luna Washington. her legal status as Denise's daughter secure beyond any challenge. The investigation into Richard Chambers had uncovered enough evidence of financial manipulation and witness intimidation to keep him busy with his own legal problems for the foreseeable future. Trayvon emerged from the house with a book tucked under his arm, having grown into the role of protective big brother with the same methodical determination he applied to everything else. At 9, he was already talking about becoming a lawyer like Mr. Mitchell, someone who fought for kids who couldn't fight for themselves. "The social worker is coming tomorrow," Luna said, dusting dirt from her hands as she stood up. The monthly check-ins would continue for another year, but they'd become routine, friendly visits rather than assessments of their fitness as a family. Miss Patterson often stayed for dinner, marveling at the transformation she'd helped make possible. "Are you nervous?" Denise asked. "Not anymore. She's not checking to see if we're really a family we already know we are." It was true. The bonds between them had strengthened and deepened through the legal battles, the investigations, the gradual process of Luna learning to trust that this safety was permanent. They'd weathered nightmares and panic attacks, identity crises, and growing pains. The ordinary struggles of raising teenagers mixed with the extraordinary challenge of healing from trauma. The work wasn't finished. Luna still saw a therapist twice a month, working through the complex grief of losing the father she'd once loved while acknowledging the reality of the man who'd hurt her. But she was learning to separate her past from her future, to believe that she deserved love without conditions, protection without price. "I've been thinking about something," Luna said, settling on the porch steps where they'd held so many important conversations over the past months. "I want to go back to the cabin. Not to live, just to visit. I want to see the place where you found me." Denise considered this carefully. They'd driven past the old Hollow Creek Road turnoff several times, but Luna had always asked her to keep going. The cabin represented both her salvation and her suffering, the place where she'd learned to survive and the place where she'd finally learned to hope. "What would you want to do there?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe just sit for a while. Remember what it felt like to believe I might actually be safe." Luna's voice grew thoughtful. "I spent so many months in that back room, listening to you and the kids, watching you turn that broken place into something that felt like home. I want to go back and remember that feeling. The moment I realized that maybe, just maybe, someone might actually want me to stay." They went the following weekend. All 4 of them piled into the Honda that had somehow survived another year of mountain roads and family adventures. The cabin looked smaller than Denise remembered, more fragile. The repairs they'd made overwhelmed again by weather and time, but it was still standing, still offering shelter to whoever might need it. Luna walked through the room slowly, touching walls and door frames like old friends. In the back room where Denise had first found her, she knelt down in the corner where she'd hidden for so many months, her hand resting on the floor as if saying goodbye to the frightened child who'd once crouched there. "This is where it started," she said quietly. "This is where I learned that sometimes miracles look like ordinary people doing extraordinary things." They spread a blanket by the creek for lunch, the same spot where Luna had taught the children to catch frogs and identify edible plants. Keisha, now 6 and missing her 2 front teeth, splashed in the shallow water while Trayvon read aloud from a book about wilderness survival that Luna had given him for his birthday. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't bought this place?" Denise asked as they watched the children play. "I try not to," Luna replied. "But sometimes I think about all the small choices that had to line up perfectly for us to find each other. You had to lose your job and your apartment. I had to run at exactly the right time. You had to see potential in a $5 cabin that anyone sensible would have walked away from. And you had to trust me enough to let me help you. That was the hardest part. But I'm glad I did." As afternoon faded toward evening, they packed up their picnic and prepared to return to their real home in town. Luna took one last walk through the cabin, saying goodbye to the place that had kept her safe when nowhere else would. "Ready?" Denise asked when Luna rejoined them at the car. "Yeah, I'm ready." As they drove away, Luna looked back once through the rear window, watching the cabin disappear into the trees. But she wasn't looking back with longing or regret. She was looking back with gratitude, the way you might wave goodbye to an old friend who'd helped you become the person you were meant to be. The cabin had saved her life. But Denise Washington had given her something even more precious: a family, a future, and the unshakable knowledge that she was loved exactly as she was. Sometimes the most broken places do hold the most beautiful secrets. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, those secrets turn out to be each other.